Hey everybody, Dave here. As you know, we've been fortunate to have built a pretty influential audience over the years. Security leaders across the globe trust us and depend on us every day to deliver the news and analysis they need to do their jobs. And that's also why so many top security companies and hot startups trust us to connect them to the decision makers and influencers to help get the word out about their brand and fill their sales funnels. We've got lots of great sponsorship opportunities that can help you get the word out too. Just visit the cyberwire.com/sponsorship to learn more and connect with us. That's the cyberwire.com/sponsorship. Thanks. A new Android spyware tool is deployed against China's Uyghur minority. Anonymous claims it disrupted the Atlanta Police Department's website yesterday to protest a police shooting. An apparently legitimate security firm has apparently been selling malware to criminals. Breach-stortion joins sextortion as a criminal tactic. Craig Williams from Cisco Talis on Astaroth, an information stealer that's been targeting Brazil. Our own Rick Howard on risk assessments and why spelling always counts. And now, a word from our sponsor, ExtraHop, securing modern business with network detection and response. Security and IT teams are under more pressure than ever. Any workforce that can go remote has done so almost overnight. That means more stress on critical systems, more potentially unsecured IoT devices on corporate networks, and an urgent need to see and respond to threats as quickly as possible. ExtraHop helps organizations like Wizards of the Coast detect threats up to 95% faster and respond 60% more efficiently. As Chief Architect and Information Security Officer Dan McDaniel put it, quote, "There's no other company that aligns to supporting the DevOps model, the speed, and the lack of friction than ExtraHop." See how it works in the full product demo. Free online at extrahop.com/cyber. That's extrahop.com/cyber. And we thank ExtraHop for sponsoring our show. Funding for this CyberWire podcast is made possible in part by McAfee. Many companies are continuing to support a work-from-home model while putting a strain on their IT resources and security. McAfee is helping companies scale their security to work-from-home employees while optimizing IT architecture. Learn more at mcafee.com/workfromhome. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Monday, June 15, 2020. Trend Micro is tracking a new campaign by Earth Empusa, also known as Poison Carp, a group believed to be linked to the Chinese government, against Uyghurs in Tibet. The campaign uses a new strain of Android spyware, ActionSpy, modularized and typically distributed in watering hole attacks. ActionSpy has also been used against a travel agency in Taiwan and political and media organizations in Turkey. The Muslim Uyghur minority in China has long been a target of domestic surveillance. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution reports that Atlanta police websites were briefly down yesterday. Tweets purporting to be from Anonymous claimed responsibility for the outage, which they called a response to Friday's fatal shooting of a man during an altercation. Quote, "Anonymous has taken action against Atlanta PD for the execution of #Rayshard Brooks. We call for the arrest of the two murderers. No more impunity." End quote. Rayshard Brooks was shot and killed by police during an attempted arrest. It's the latest hacking incident to accompany recent unrest in the U.S. As with other recent episodes connected with Anonymous, it's first, difficult to attribute, and second, basically nuisance-level vandalism. ZDNet reports that the Italian security firm CloudEye has been selling criminals malware. The report is sourced to security firm Checkpoint, whose investigations of the malware dropper GU Loader eventually led it to CloudEye's anti-reverse engineering binary protection service. They connected CloudEye to a malware crypting service, DarkEye, and the associated GU Loader, which, as ZDNet says, had been heavily advertised on hacking exchanges since 2014. The same website, securitycode.eu, is involved with both DarkEye and CloudEye. In fact, it makes the connection explicit with this splash page. DarkEye evolved into CloudEye, says the page, explaining that it's the next generation of Windows executables protection. Check Point's analysis found that CloudEye and GU loader code were the same, barring some irrelevant applied code randomization. So the researchers' conclusion, quote, CloudEye operations may look legal, but the service provided by CloudEye has been a common denominator in thousands of attacks over the past year, end quote. ZDNet says that CloudEye has denounced Check Point's report and denied any involvement in crime, but there have been more calls for Italian authorities to investigate CloudEye and its founders in connection with aiding and abetting a criminal operation and money laundering. CloudEye has apparently, ZDNet says, shut down in the wake of the report. Who were the customers? According to Check Point, they were threat actors with no deep technical knowledge, interested in using commodity malware they picked up in the criminal-to-criminal market. Organizations are receiving extortion notes that claim, falsely, to have installed info-stealing ransomware, and that if they're not paid, they'll destroy the victim's sites and release sensitive data online. There's no ransomware. The threats are similar to the sextortion notes that claim, falsely, to have access to discreditable browser histories and webcam videos. Naked Security calls it breach-stortion, equally indiscriminate and equally full of empty threats. It might be marginally harder to recognize than sextortion, but an organization would know, one would generally think, if it had suffered a ransomware infestation because they'd notice that they could no longer access their data. But actually, the hoods aren't claiming to have encrypted the victim's data. They just say they've stolen it. How? According to their message, like this, quote, "We have hacked your website and extracted your databases. How did this happen? Our team has found a vulnerability within your site that we were able to exploit. After finding the vulnerability, we were able to get your database credentials and extract your entire database and move the information to an offshore server." End quote. So maybe they have the data and maybe they don't. But absent the kind of evidence serious crooks normally provide, usually a small sample of the stolen material posted to establish that they've really got something, it's probably smarter to dismiss the threat as empty. Bleeping Computer says the notes themselves are unusually well written without the eccentric usage one normally sees, so they're missing one of the customary tells that so often betray the bogus impostures used in social engineering. We've looked at some of the samples published, and while the spelling, grammar, and usage are standard, the style is atrocious, hackneyed, breathless, and too much like something you'd read in cheap crime fiction. Phooey to them all. And finally, there's another case in which bad spelling doesn't betray criminal intent. According to Krebs on Security, Privnotes.com has been impersonating the legitimate Privnote.com free messaging service. The bogus site is phishing for Bitcoin by substituting the criminal's Bitcoin address for any such address it detects in communications. Bleeping Computer notes that the campaign combines cyber squatting and phishing. Specifically, it's typo squatting. The criminal's URL is just one character off from the legitimate site, and it's just taken a singular to an innocent-looking plural. So remember, kids, spelling always counts. And I'm pleased to be joined once again by our own CyberWire chief analyst, Rick Howard. Rick, always great to have you back. We're going to have another preview of your CSO Perspectives podcast. And this week, you're talking about risk.
Yeah, and how do we calculate risk? And this has been a stumbling block for most of my peers since I've been doing this some 25 years. And I got to tell you, Dave, it is really about our fear of probability and statistics. Do you remember taking that class back in college?
Oh, boy. Yeah. And you know what I remember most about it is how counterintuitive so much of it is.
Yeah, that's the way it was for me, too. I barely got through that class by the skin of my teeth, and I definitely didn't understand it. And as I've been in the industry, you know, we have tried to calculate risk based on, well, what we tried to learn, okay, in that probability and stats course. And let me tell you, there's a reason that most of us are IT guys and not math guys, right? Because math is hard. and we try to do risk assessments by calculating probabilities based on what we learned in that class. And it's essentially, you have to be able to count things, right? Count the things that have happened and then divide it by the number of times it could have happened. And that sounds really simple, but in cybersecurity, the variables are vast and we don't even know where to start. And what really is true is our perception of what probability is completely wrong. And we need to expand what we think it could be. There is a great scientist out in California. His name was Dr. Ron Howard, and he invented decision analysis theory back in the 60s. And he has a whole different perception of what probability is. It's really a measurement, or it could be a measurement, of what we know about a certain situation. And when you think of probability in that way, okay, it kind of expands how we think about it. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Right. What we really want to do is figure out what the probability is of a material impact by a cyber event in our organization in, say, the next 3 years. Right. And what I usually do when I make those calculations is I whip out my qualitative risk heat map chart and give it 3 categories: high, medium, or low, which is not very precise. But with a probability assigned it, you might say there's a 4% chance that our organization will be materially impacted in the next 3 years. And that might be a swag, but it is definitely more precise about what you know about your security infrastructure.
How much of this is kind of that old thing from the Jurassic Park movie? You know, the butterfly flapping its wings and we get rain instead of snow. Like, can things spin out of control really quickly when you're doing these sorts of calculations?
Well, I think the thing to remember here is that everything we do in a risk calculation is a model. And all models are wrong, but some are useful. Okay, so
some are less wrong than others.
Exactly right.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about how to do really simple models to get a kind of a baseline of what your risk is. And then later on in the series, we'll talk about how to get more complex, but we'll try to ease your way into it and get over your fear of what probability and stats are.
All right. Well, do check it out. It's Rick Howard's CSO Perspectives podcast. It is over on CyberWire Pro. Check it out at thecyberwire.com. Rick, always great to talk to you.
Thank you, sir.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Proofpoint's Observe It. Most organizations understand the challenges of external cyber attacks, but many of today's threats come from within. According to the 2019 Verizon DBIR report, 34% of all data breaches involve an insider. Whether it's careless users, disgruntled employees, or compromised accounts, insider threats are on the rise. To stop these data breaches, Observe It, the leading people-centric insider threat management solution, empowers security teams to identify user risk, detect insider-led data breaches, and accelerate security incident response, so you can protect your organization from the risk of insider threats. Get your free trial at observeit.com/cyberwire. That's observeit.com/cyberwire. And we thank Observe It for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Craig Williams. He's the head of Talos Outreach at Cisco. Craig, always great to have you back. You and your team have some interesting research you wanted to share here. This is about an information stealer you all have been tracking?
Yeah, so this one's called Astaroth, and basically it's an information stealing Trojan that has a somewhat unique profile because it's targeting people in Brazil. And the reason this one really popped up on our radar is because it's one of the vast array of malware using COVID-19 lures right now.
Well, take us through some of the details here. What brought it to your attention?
Well, there's a lot of obfuscation and anti-analysis involved. It was actually pretty challenging to reverse. We had to rely on Talos's reverse engineering team. Those folks are top notch. And, when we have samples that evasive, we typically expect that they're doing something bad. Which let's take for a moment and just think about this, because I think this is worth noting as well. A lot of bad guys will make their malware super evasive, thinking that makes it like undetectable in their mind. But let's look at the reality of the situation. There really isn't much benign software, if any, that is hacked and obfuscated to that extent, right? So the sheer fact that they've tried to obfuscate the program flow, which is super obvious, is enough for us to say, yeah, it's up to something bad. You generally don't want that running on your system. We don't really even have to know what it does. So I always think that's funny, right? People go to these great lengths to obfuscate the program flow when you can simply check to see if that's happened. And if it has, is it one of a handful of known good things that do that and attempt to protect their IP or something silly? And chances are it's not, and it's a bad guy, and they've done something super obvious and attempts to be sneaky. It's like trying to rob a bank with a strobe light on.
Well, I mean, is there a flip side to that? Have you guys run into situations where people try to hide in plain sight?
Absolutely, right? I mean, that's incredibly common as well, right? That goes back to, these fake invoice scams or, lots of email-based scams where they pretend to be a friend. And even in this one, there were lots of fake COVID-19 lures attempting to be real information. There was lots of invoice scam type of stuff going on. And if you flip through the blog post, you'll see examples of some of those. But, at the end of the day, what the attacker is trying to do is use an initial vector that should look legitimate, right? And the user's tricked to clicking on that through curiosity or whatever. And that's really the COVID-19 angle here, right? It's important people realize from a cybersecurity perspective, the COVID-19 pandemic has really put one single target on the entire human race, right? Every single person on Earth is susceptible to COVID-19 information. They want to know more. They're scared. They don't understand what's happening. And so if you make an empty promise like that, people will click on it. And the bad guys are aware of this. They've realized it. And so we've seen a massive shift across basically all malware families and even APT actors towards COVID lures because the effectiveness rate is just through the roof.
In the time we have, is there anything technically that stands out to you? Anything they've been doing under the hood here that's noteworthy?
Well, the C2 mechanism is pretty unique. They basically are using YouTube as a way to have a covert channel for C2 that's probably going to be one that isn't inspected. If you look at the way that most businesses try to reduce inspection through their security devices or through their firewall or whatever, they try to identify sites that they can effectively whitelist. And so if you can use something like Pastebin or YouTube or any website that allows the user to use data, I think last year one was even using Reddit, that's a way to potentially bypass that inspection for nefarious purposes. So yeah, at the end of the day, this is not that rare of a piece of malware, but the fact that it's using COVID-19 lures, incredibly evasive techniques are all quite suspicious. And so it's definitely one we took note of.
All right. Well, the blog post is titled Astaroth, Maze of Obfuscation and Evasion Reveals Dark Stealer. That is on the Talos blog from Cisco. Craig Williams, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. And for professionals and cybersecurity leaders who want to stay abreast of this rapidly evolving field, sign up for CyberWire Pro. It'll save you time and keep you informed. Listen for us on your Alexa smart speaker, too. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible, especially our supporting sponsor, Proofpoint's Observe It, the leading people-centric insider threat management solution. Learn more at observeit.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Peru Prakash, Stefan Vaziri, Kelsey Bond, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow.